language learning, second language acquisition, and psycholinguistics. He has published several papers on the topics in Scopus Index journals such as Reflections, ABAC Journal, and Learn Journal. Please welcome Dr. Monthon Kanokpermpoon.
Hi
Hello,
everyone.
Ajahn.
Hi, thank
Thanks
you.
very much for being with us today.
Right.
Let me continue with our next speaker. Our next speaker is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Liberal Arts and Science at Kasetsart University. He received a PhD in English language teaching and applied linguistics from the University of Warwick in the UK. His research interests include applied corpus linguistics, genre-based analysis, vocabulary instruction, and TEFL. Let us welcome Assistant Professor Dr. Attapol Khamkhien. Hello, Ajahn. All right,
อาจารย์
let's have
อัธพล
our
อาจารย์ อัธพล hello
Hello.
Assistant Attapol. Hello, can you hear us?
can you hear us
Hello. Yes.
okay
Yes,
sure
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Our next speaker is lecturer in applied linguistics and TESOL at Newcastle University in the UK. She is the primary investigator of an EU-funded project titled Communities, Languages, and Activities app. She is interested in the communicative and pedagogical aspects of multimodal interaction for online language learning and teaching, focusing on social presence, meaning making, instruction giving, and translanguaging. Let us welcome Dr. Müge Satar. Hello, hello,
hello
Dr.
Hello,
Mugee.
very much for the warm
Thanks a
welcome.
lot for being with us.
Thank you
And
for
of
the invitation.
course, to complete,
Sorry, I'm
and
not
of
sure whether
course,
there's a huge lag on the internet, so we might end up talking over each other, but I guess everyone is now used to that so far, so apologies if I talk over. Thank you.
right. Thank you. And of course, to complete our pool of speakers, let us welcome our next speaker, who is currently a lecturer at Tembusu College in National University of Singapore. She has a background in education and applied linguistics. She did her PhD at the University of Warwick, where she studied the practices of academic researchers in the UK higher education system. Her research interests lie in discourse analysis, social interactions, identity construction, and higher education studies. Put your hands together for Dr. Hashishan. Hello, Dr. Ha.
Hi, everyone. Hi.
Mhm.
Thanks, everyone. For today, we're going to cover the following points of discussion. We'll cover the interactions, motivations, and identities in language learning. But to start this conversation going in a very casual way, let's start with a very short introduction of our speakers, focusing on their experience teaching online and their, of course, experience interacting with their students, and also your current research projects focusing in online learning and teaching. Would you like to start, Adan?
Joey ครับ Joey ครับ first of all please unpin me I think I
Okay,
better like off the stage now right
sure, Adan. Okay, there you
thank
go.
you
All right. Would you like to start, Adan Monton Cup?
Okay, so in terms of the online language learning and teaching, especially on like interactions, I think it's like kind of like we experience this all together all the time, right? When we start like online and then students just kind of turned off from the online platform and then things like that. So to get them like motivated or learn a lot, I think it's better to create some kind of joint interaction like among students and teachers as well. It's not just like we give the assignments for the teacher for the students, but we actually have to like engage with the task with the students as well when we are doing a kind of like online activity together, right? So what I actually like do a lot is that I always like create a kind of joint platform like together where the students can like share their experience, like ideas, their understandings to the topic. For example, in the writing class, I would create some kind of like a Google document or Jamboard and get the student like, to jump in and then show and share like their ideas and their writings together. So that's kind of like creating a little bit more of an interaction with students, and at the same time, it's not just one platform, like when you just jump into one platform and then that's it. I would simply say like you need to have a variety of platforms where you can, have them some offline or online, interaction with the students all the time. So that's kind of like my experience in terms of like online teaching at the moment, right?
Thank you so much, Ajahn Montoya. I think that's a very good way to start our conversation. Why don't
Right.
we turn it to Dr. Hah?
Hey,
So,
my name is Joe Nuts. I'm here to learn. What do we learn?
Okay.
oh, sorry, what was that? Okay. Our apologies again to our audience. We would really appreciate if you could keep your microphones on mute. We'll have you later in the Q&A session. So we can proceed. Let's welcome Dr. Hah. Would you like to share your experiences and maybe the research projects you're working on as regards online learning and teaching?
Thanks very much, Joey. Hi, everyone. I'm Sicien. It's a pleasure to be here today. So maybe to give a bit of context on what I do. So I'm a lecturer and a teaching fellow at Tembusu College, which was one of the first residential colleges set up in
Yo,
Singapore.
no crap, bro. Friends are gonna be proud of you.
Okay. So I'm going to continue. By
Go on.
residential college, it means that the students actually live on campus in that college and they take lessons together with their peers from other disciplines. So the kinds of modules I teach are very general education modules, and not so much in terms of language per se. We tend to discuss topics that are broader. So to give an example, we talked about environmental sustainability in one module. And recently I taught a module about universities, the purposes of universities. And in that module, we had some discussions about technology use and online learning and teaching. So I'll be happy to share some of my observations from what our students have to say about going through this. We have about a year and a half of online learning for quite a number of them, hybrid classes, lectures online and all of that. There was also a semester where I had seminars entirely on Zoom. So we had 13 weeks of Zoom seminars. I'm quite lucky. My classes were very small, 15 students. So it was mainly to do with discussions. So I completely identify with what Monthon said about trying to create a variety of activities in order to engage them, on Zoom and to get them talking and discussing. Yeah. Thanks very much. Maybe we'll go on to the next speaker and we can go into the conversation proper.
That's right. All right, thank you very much. Maybe we can continue with Assistant Professor Dr. Attapol.
In my context, I'm responsible for two class of two setting. To English language classroom, like for the general English and English major students. But for the non-English major students, it's very hard for me to get the student to engage in the interactions in the classroom because we have big class. Like basically in the past we have like 40 or 50 students in the class. That is face-to-face classroom. But right now, even though the online classes, but we have a number of students, so we have to accommodate maybe in some class more than 80 students. So it's very difficult for us. I mean, I think this is the situation that most of the universities know. A number of universities in Thailand faces right now because we for the four skills, for the four skill course like English courses, it's very difficult to ask the student to speak it out in the classroom. But for the English major students, it's quite easy to control and manage because we have like Jonathan said, it depends on the teachers who create and provide, the platforms for the students. And then I use Zoom as a mainstream for the instruction, but I use the Google Classroom, for the assignment, and then use this game. That's basically, I think most of the teachers did, in the past, like previous semester. But right now, I think most of the students, even us, quite suffer from Zoom as well. And then we have to find out a new method to teach the student, and I have to adapt myself. I have to change my teaching methodology. So maybe I myself have to deduct the contents of the course, and then ask the student to engage just in terms of instead of taking the exams, just only that. And it depends on I think for the interaction, it's not just only the teachers and students, but it depends on the students and students as well. That's why we as a teacher, we have to think when we design the tasks or the activities for the student in course. Hello. Hello, Joey.
Joey, are you still with us?
Joey. So let's start. Dr.
Let's move
Mugee.
on to Dr. Mugee, please.
Yeah.
Right.
I suppose to an internet connection issue.
Right.
I'll proceed then. Well, my perspective on online learning and teaching comes from my background in studying computer-mediated communication to help students improve their speaking skills. So that was my master's thesis when I just finished graduate school and not graduate school, my undergraduate studies, and started looking at how students can overcome their anxieties and improve their speaking skills. At the time, I was teaching in Turkey at a secondary school, and none of my students were willing to talk in the classroom. They were shy, they were embarrassed with their pronunciation, and that was a big issue for me to get them to talk. And at the time, there was no Zoom. It was only text chat and audio chat, audio conversations were starting to come in. So what I did for my master's study then was to see the advantages of computer-mediated communication, anonymity, not seeing your face, not using your video camera, but just using your voice, and how confident the students would get. And that was an experimental design, and it did show that students' anxiety levels lowered and their speaking skills improved compared to a classroom where they only interacted present in person. But that was pre-Zoom, as I said. Then I moved on to look at when Skype came in, Skype became more available, and video conferencing became an interest. I then wanted to look at how interactions work in video conferencing settings. And again, I looked at learner-learner interactions via video conferencing, and I looked at a concept called social presence, which I hope I will be able to talk a little bit about in the conversation proper. The concept takes the idea that to interact with somebody else, to talk with somebody else in a longer period of time, you need to connect with those people. You need to have a presence online, because when you meet people online, it's not the same. It's not the same as meeting somebody face to face. You have very little cues to understand that person, and having that emotional and social connection is much more difficult. So I looked at how learners would establish that relationship, would set up a camaraderie kind of joyful and relaxed atmosphere where they can continue talking. And they were all speakers of the same L1, the same native language, first language. And what I observed was that they were speaking using less of their first language and more of the target language, which was English, when they were communicating online. For some reason, they didn't feel that their L1 identities were interfering. So that was my PhD work. And since then, I've also started looking at teacher-learner interactions. And with my colleague, Cara Wiggum from Clermont-Ferrand, recently we've looked at how online teachers give instructions in Skype and Zoom kind of video conferencing settings. What kind of things we need to be aware of when we're sending the students the task instructions, for example. I've also got an interest in virtual exchange, which is called online, which is also online intercultural exchanges, or in TESOL, we also call them telecollaborative exchanges, where students from different cultural backgrounds come together and try to understand each other. And in that line of work, I'm interested in understanding how people establish cultural affinity, understand each other well, be able to relate with somebody who doesn't share the same cultural background, but also use language in authentic settings, that the language then becomes the only means of communication, and what the students share with each other becomes authentic, because they're not talking and asking questions to somebody they know in the classroom that they already know the favorite activities of, but they're talking to somebody they don't know from a different culture and they're genuinely interested in. So I hope these different projects will link in with our 3 pillars of conversation topics of interaction, motivation, and identities today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miyagi, and I apologize for that short break. Internet is really crazy right now. But thanks a lot. That's a very good way to start this conversation. And I think that leads us to the very first key point that we would like to talk about today. So let's talk about the interaction. And I think Dr. Miyagi started talking about this, and it's quite interesting to know what is the learning and teaching situations and online interaction. This time, I would like to give the microphone. Who would like to start? Maybe from the Singapore context, Dr. Sicien. Go on.
Sure, sure. In terms of interactions, so it's something that I'm quite interested in, social interactions, and I used to do a bit of conversation analysis in my previous research. I'm always quite interested in how people converse and how they interact in conversational discourse. And that really changed when we had to do online teaching. And so with Zoom as my context, because I spent a semester teaching seminars on Zoom, I noticed that quite a lot of things change when teachers and students interact with each other during our Zoom seminars. For one, I think students become hyper-conscious, or what I call hyper-conscious. They become very awkward and very shy at first in terms of speaking up. As you notice, we are all muted by default when we enter a Zoom room. And so lecturers often observe a wall of silence that greets us, even when we say, good morning, how's everyone? And then there's a wall of silence. So students are very reluctant to switch on their microphones to say the first thing or to make contact. So that was something that was quite one of the first more apparent observations that we see. Often when we ask a question, they will switch on their microphones to answer the question and then very quickly mute their microphones to kind of indicate that that's it. Okay, I finished what I want to say. And yeah, don't call on me anymore. So they're very careful about that. I think part of the reason is also because the microphones pick up a lot of noises in the background. So sometimes just sipping water or the creak of the chair can draw attention, and you can see the yellow boxes around my screen now because I'm the speaker now. And I think students are very conscious of that, having the yellow box highlighting their faces. So in my seminars, I try to encourage everyone to switch on their video cams so that it's easier to make sense of each other. And it ties in with what Mugee was saying, there's all this verbal and non-verbal cues that we are making sense of when we interact with each other, when we try to create rapport, especially when you're meeting students for the first time on Zoom. Yeah, so that's my 2 cents worth. Just to start off the conversation on how Zoom interactions have been really quite different from offline spontaneous conversations.
Right. Thank you so much. That's a wonderful start, Dr. Sicien. Let's give it up for maybe Dr. Montoya.
Okay, so I would love to add up to like Sicien, like in terms of like students' interaction and making rapport. I think that is one of my areas of research in terms of like creating students like relationship among each other in online learning and interaction. So basically, then I think one of the most important aspects of doing online teaching is to create rapport as something we all need in interaction, right? So rapport doesn't mean like you just start and talk to each other anyway. It's just like get to know each other. Basically, what I normally do in the first class is not just like come in and like discuss and talk, but we started doing some kind of like activity, entertainment activities, for example, like watching some clips together or listen to a kind of music together, and then to start a kind of like soothing the class like that. And based on my observation and the students' reports, they appreciate a kind of like get them to feel like working online is just like their own learning environment. I mean, their own appreciation of life as well. So making the classroom and online teaching and students like online interaction as the way they are is kind of like creating some kind of rapport in the classroom as well. So I think that that's something that we need to consider as a major like teaching context in an online version like this, like that. So I'm going to give you back to the microphone.
All right, thank you so much. Let's hear it from Dr. Miyagi.
I would like to start with agreeing with Sicien and Mugee. Sorry, I'm not quite sure if I'm pronouncing everything correctly.
Yeah, Mugee is fine.
Yes, creating that social bond is especially important, and those breaking the ice activities become much more important perhaps in online activities. But even whatever you do, even if you meet your students for 13 weeks, have you not realized I don't know whether you managed to see your students face to face. I've come across some of mine that I've taught over the year because the lockdown measures have been easing down in the UK. And when I meet them, they're totally different. And they say the same thing to me. But when you meet somebody online, the impressions you get from somebody's online personality and online behavior, just even the looks of the person can be totally different. Because the way we communicate on a screen is mediated through the two-dimensional medium of a webcam, which only takes one angle. Even if you just take a photograph, you would see the differences. You see, no, this doesn't look like me. I don't look like this. When you're live, who you are, what you do, and how you connect changes quite significantly. So what I wanted to say in terms of interaction and how we design these platforms is perhaps not just to be focused or concerned too much about the tools or too much about synchronous communication, which we've all done a lot this year. But in the literature and in the theories of distance education, which is what we're doing practically, we're delivering distance education online, but we are actually trying to teach at a distance, is to avail of the other benefits of online communication platforms. If it's okay to share my slides, I've put together a few things to help guide my, my thoughts. On this point, I'd like to share only 2 slides of this presentation to clarify what I want to say. Can you see these now?
Okay, yes, we can see them.
So I guess before we start designing our online teaching, there are different decisions we need to make. And perhaps the most important thing is to start with the tasks and our aims and objectives. What kind of tasks we can design for if we want our learners to speak up, to turn on their microphones and to participate and to engage socially. And what kind of tasks we need to design if we want to deliver a lecture. And delivering a lecture and the type of design we produce then would be different from delivering a seminar or a discussion where students will take the microphone, not the teacher. And if we want them to collaborate, to produce, to design a project, to design an artifact together, then the task design would be different. So the goals, the roles of the participants and how we facilitate as teachers vary significantly. So to me, it's really important to start with that kind of a higher level approach to pedagogy than to start thinking about which tools, which platforms we're using. Then who is going to speak to who? Is it going to be the student speaking to the teacher? One student, one teacher, or students as a group speaking to the teacher, or students speaking to students. So I've stopped delivering lectures online on Zoom. I create video recordings now. I create small screencasts so that the students can browse through what I'm going to say at their own pace. I add subtitles, I provide a script, I provide the slides, because I'm aware that not everyone has the same level of language. But if I want the students to talk to each other, if it's a seminar, if we're talking about a reading article, for example, I put them in small groups in breakout rooms, and I get them to write and take notes on a collaborative document where all groups can see all groups' notes. Because it's also very difficult to monitor group work in the classroom. you just walk around, you just look at the groups and you know which groups are struggling. But once you create breakout rooms in Zoom, it becomes very difficult to jump in from one group to the other. And it is so disruptive. When you jump in, the students stop talking. They go, okay, are you monitoring us? What are you doing? So I found that having an online document, getting the learners to take notes on an online document helps them to see what each group is also doing, what kind of topics they're discussing, and it helps me to see which groups are struggling. And I also ask them to add questions to me. So if a group asks a question to me on the online document, I just jump into their group and I can help them and I can talk with them, or I ask them to call me in via the help button. And finally, then is the decision to think about whether we're delivering the lesson synchronously or asynchronously, and which modality. I've got a huge interest in modes. What do you communicate in the written mode, in audio mode, or the visual mode are different. So maybe the students are aware, conscious of their, their images in Zoom, and they're conscious of their pronunciation, and they hesitate taking the microphone. Why don't we ask them to contribute on chat? Why don't we then create anonymous platforms where you can embed a slide where everyone can just add in their opinions anonymously. And when things are anonymous, that's when I see most interaction and engagement, because when you're anonymous, no one knows who you are. And you're able to express even the silliest opinions quite easily. So one difficulty in Zoom is having that anonymity. The benefit of online communication sometimes comes from not being yourself, being able to hide your identity, or being able to go into a new identity so that you can freely express yourself. And there are various different ways of doing this. If you want writing, there is text chat or Zoom chat if you want things to take place synchronously. But I'm pretty sure most universities have their discussion boards, and discussion boards fell out of favor for some reason, but they are grateful to give students time to reflect on what they want to say, to compose what they say, and contribute that way. If you want asynchronous but audio conversations, there are tools like Walkaroo, where you just go in, create a short clip, say something, and you can easily share it on social media or share a link or download and then create an MP3 file. So maybe rather than asking them to speak up right away in the synchronous session, we can reduce the time of the synchronous sessions, but then give tasks for asynchronous interaction where they can even record video images like Flipgrid. It's a safe environment that you create a classroom and you ask a question, and each of your students can then answer in 2, 3, up to 5 minutes of video recordings to contribute and say what they want to say and share with each other. So there are different levels of anonymity. There are different levels of presence we can create in these environments, but also we need to ensure for equality, diversity, and inclusion. I know the situation in the UK is not too bad in terms of access to technologies, but in Turkey, I'm aware that many students don't even have internet connection. The only device where students can connect online is their father's phone, and that only becomes available in the evening. And sometimes there is only one television, and they are asked to follow up the TV, the broadcasted lessons. But then they've got 5 siblings. So who gets to study when? Sometimes we have internet problems. You drop off. You have good connection, but then all of a sudden, when it's your turn to say something, or when it's a really interesting discussion, your internet connection breaks down and you lose that interaction. You lose that precious time to interact. So to me, yes, Zoom is fantastic. And I've got a huge interest in video conferencing. That's what I study. But kind of a more self-aware use of Zoom is probably going to benefit most of us in the long term. Being aware of what Zoom can do and what other modes of online delivery can allow us and can enable our learners to do as well. I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mugee. Would you like to continue the conversation, Dr. Attapol?
Yes, just a bit, because I think Dr. Mugee concluded everything about the interaction, right? And I can see that this is correspond to what the literature say in terms of the interaction, because when we make a decisions on selecting the platform and even access the interactions of the students or teachers and students. By the way, we can see that the interactions can be grouped or can be divided into four types. The first one is the learners and teachers or learner and instructors, because we as a teacher, when we need to see or access the evaluate the students' performance about the interactions or the speaking performance, when it depends on the task as well, and then we have to as a teacher, we have to facilitate the learning activities, monitor and evaluate the student progress, and it depends on even it depends on the information that we give the students when we ask them to do something as like interactions or conversation or giving comments or commentary, blah blah blah. So that is the ways of the online learning can do in terms of the learners or students and instructors or teachers. And then we can say another kinds of the interactions like the students and the contents as well. I mean, if we provide something and ask the student to do or to complete that activity, so we can see that how the students can interact with the contents and the activities. And then, for example, if we ask the student to do the group work or the collaborative project work, like two pairs of like group works, and then we can see how they interact with the subject matters and what they think. And if, for example, if you provide a platform and ask them to speak like face to face like this, like asynchronous learning, and then we can see another type, another layers of the conversations between the student and student. But if we ask the student like just to leave some comments on the task and then give some opinions over the task, and then we can see another types of the language that they use in terms of the interactions as well. And next is about the student and students. The way that students talk to their peers and the way the students talk to us, totally different, I would say. This is not just only from the tasks or from the activities, but the way that they speak, and that why Mugee talked about the identity when they express themselves, interacting with their peers and interacting with the instructors. And the last one is interactions in terms of the learners and interface, because it's like not all the students can access the internet. In my case, most of the students learn the online materials from their mobile phone, and we as a teacher must accept that when they interact with the mobile phone and on the computer, their performance are totally different, and this can impact on the way the interactions and even their scores when if you have to mark and access or monitor their learning progress. And that's just about the interaction that I think.
Thank you very much. I think that that's very clear on how you understand the interaction. And I think the next point is very much engaging to determine when we ask students to do online presentations, how do we handle that? So that's now coming from a teacher perspective, handling different presentations that students perform on an online platform. Perhaps we could start from Adan Monton.
Basically, presentations, right? What I can say is that I have lots of presentations in my classes, but I would not do it synchronously, or I mean like online platform, because it's kind of very, very hard. As I said, some students just disconnected immediately. So what I actually do a lot for the presentation is that the students that create their own scenario of what they wanted to do, and then based on the thing we're working on, and then what they can actually do is that they can record it using their own smartphone, or even like using animation if they don't want to show themselves. So it's like the kind of like learners' autonomy to design and create their own like presentation. Basically, we have to understand as well that the quality of the video or the quality of the clips might not be good. So don't judge that. Okay, don't judge that kind of thing in your evaluation. Even like when the students couldn't actually provide you with a video or clip at all, it's that only like the sound is fine too. So make sure that you give like lots of opportunities, a lot of freedom of choices for the students to choose from. One of the projects that I did is get the student to integrate, besides like creating one own like presentation on a particular topic, I just integrate presentation as a part of a big project. For example, the student like go and do some kind of research. For example, like survey online, and then they just created some kind of presentation after that. I think this kind of thing is going to give the students more of the personal like satisfaction and personal learning styles that they can create on their own, based on the project that we actually started with the students. So and I'm experimenting one of the projects on how to do like not just a kind of short project, but a long-term project where the students have to do a lot of things along the way through the classroom, and then the presentation just jump into to get the student reports on some of the progress they did. So the pilot result is that the student appreciated what they can do, like when they don't have to be present in front of the people and present on their own, like instead they submitted the clips and things like that. The level of motivation and the learning experience as well as the proficiency level developed so much. So I can say the teacher need to reconsider how to design the child instead of like giving the students to present something, but then integrate it into a kind of project that they can do on their own. That's what I can say. Right.
It's very wonderful, Agan. Thank you very much. Let's listen now from Dr. Sicien.
So this is extending on the same line of presentations. Okay. So I do student presentations as part of assessment. So it's one out of maybe 3 other or 4 other assignments that they have to do. And they usually do it in groups. And like Monthon, I would have preferred it if it could be done in person in the usual classroom. However, we had to one semester turn everything online. So all of us we were forced to do it online. And I couldn't change my assessment, it was too late to do that. So what I told the students to do was to record it. So they can pre-record their PowerPoint slides and then record their voice speaking over it. Some of them are quite savvy, they're quite resourceful, and they record themselves on Zoom, I think. So you have the slides and you have the small little video of them talking. I do agree that the quality of the recording can vary quite differently. So some groups are more savvy, they are more resourceful, and maybe a bit more hardworking in trying to get, a good quality recording. Some are a bit like, yeah, well, we just record our voice over the PowerPoint and it's very hard to hear and it's not very good. So yes, the quality varies a lot. So I think in terms of if we were to do it with the class, we might have to prepare them in terms of maybe showing them certain tools they can use to pre-record their PowerPoint presentations. I think what helps was that I could get the class to watch the presentations before class, before the seminar. And then when we come into the seminar proper, that's when the Q&A starts. That's the live Q&A, so that it shortens the time that we need to be in the Zoom classroom. So I think one thing that a lot of researchers and teachers notice is that the longer you have a lecture or the longer you have a class on Zoom, the more fatigue there is. People just lose engagement and interest levels. So I rather go for a short and sweet lesson, but more intense. And we do a lot of things in 1.5 hours instead of 3 hours, something like that. So that's what I would do with presentations. Watch it before class, we do Q&A. So our 4 group mates or whatever, they handle questions on the spot in a Zoom. I do notice the difference in engagement levels. So engagement is higher when it's done off person. Engagement levels are slightly lower if you ask students to watch the presentation beforehand and then come to the Zoom seminar. Some of them don't seem to have watched it carefully. Some of them ask questions that should not have been asked. So that's something that is a bit lacking. I think that's still something that has to be worked on. So I suppose if we want to build presentations as part of the assessment, like Monton said, you either build it as part of a bigger project or maybe vary the assignments a bit. Maybe you have other kinds of tasks or essays or little other kinds of assignments that can be done offline. I do notice from the discussion that in terms of online learning, there could be losses and opportunities. One of the losses that I hear from my students is that Zoom does not allow them to have that informal chit chat with other friends. And that can be an obstacle to them getting to know each other, to them creating rapport with their friends and their classmates in class. So Zoom doesn't allow that because everyone's just looking at the lecturer. So that's something that I haven't quite found a solution to. We do tend to send them into breakout rooms so that they get to chat in their own groups for a while before I enter and see if they're on track. That creates a bit of opportunity for them to know each other, but that seems to be a bigger loss in terms of online learning. However, I also noticed that online learning affords quite a lot of opportunities. So when we were talking about how it makes visible group work, I think Mugee was talking about how groups get to see what other people are doing when we use a collaborative shared document. So like Google Shared Docs or Google Slides. It's something that might not be possible if we were doing group work in a conventional classroom because groups will be talking amongst themselves, right? But on Zoom, they can now see what each or what other groups are talking about and writing. Yeah. So I thought, well, that's a technological affordance that could be made use of when we go online with teaching. Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks very much. And I think we would agree that that is now our new favorite Netflix, binge watching, right? Our students' performances. All right, let's hear it from Dr. Miyagi.
I'll just echo what Sicien said in terms of presentations being watched before coming to class for discussion. That's kind of the flipped approach. And if you look for flipped learning, there is quite a wide range of literature now available on flipped learning and how to make it more effective. In terms of student presentations, I don't do any student presentations in my class. It's not part of our assessment. My assessment usually works around students producing artifacts and writing an essay explaining the rationale behind those artifacts. But I do the presentations and they watch, and I again do hear you saying that they come to class not necessarily having watched the lectures or not necessarily having read the material to be discussed. I guess once you move from the synchronous to asynchronous environment, one of the main issues that come up is time management and students' autonomy and agency. And although if you look at online and distance language learning literature, people would say, oh, you can learn anywhere, anytime. To me, that's a myth. We don't learn anytime, anywhere. We have to have a dedicated space, even if it's a short period of time, to focus on what we want to learn. Learning can happen. Incidental learning, of course, can happen on the move. If you have a mobile app looking at learning some words, if you're waiting for the bus and engaging with that mobile app, of course, you would learn a few things. But if you're talking of more organized teaching and learning, like the way we're talking about, watching other students' presentations, engaging with them at a deep level, I don't think you would be able to do that on a bus journey of a 10-minute bus journey. Of course, if you're on a train of 3 hours, maybe you would, because that gives you quite dedicated time. But there are also all sorts of interactions students have to manage online. Things pop up here and there, and we get distracted way too much. So I guess how we engage them with the flipped approach, getting learners to engage with each other's presentations before, would be to give them time and space to do that in the synchronous session. Maybe once you meet at your seminar, we could give them time not to talk, but tell everyone to turn off their audio and microphones and videos and just go into the platform where they would watch all the recordings and then come and share their views. It's just maybe it's a loss of time of synchronicity, but we really need to sometimes timetable for some students, or we need to tell them that they need to timetable, that we're not going to have a synchronous time for that period, that it is really essential. So it's kind of setting expectations and goals at the beginning for them to engage afterwards. As I said, I don't do PowerPoint presentations, but one of my PhD students, Pataramas, is here with us in the audience. I can see her, but I don't want to put her in the spotlight, but she's looking at how learners are engaging multimodally with their written drafts, to then turning them into multimodal posters to then present them. And as part of her summer project, she looked at a group where they created the object that they were designing the poster for, and how they multimodally engaged the students, their friends, as they were giving presentations. So the presentation skills, I guess, also become important. She was lucky enough to collect her data in the face-to-face setting. So, but if you want to contact her, I guess I'm pretty sure she'll be willing to do that, willing to correspond with you. I don't know whether we'll have time to talk about some participation patterns as well. There's something I'd like to share, but I think I would like to leave the floor to Attapol now for him to talk about assessment and presentations. I think he's got more expertise in that area.
Yes, this is one of the things that has come to my concerns about the presentation. I mean, because I use a lot of presentation as one of the assessment in my course, because you know, it can measure a lot of things about the speaking performance or the presentation skill. But when I decided to do to ask them to do the presentation, so I have to ask them to record the presentations as well, so that, you know, for the first time that I use the presentation, lots of the students try to mute themselves and switch off the, you know, that camera. And I will have to say to them, I said to them that it's a protocol that you need to, you know, contribute to something, or cheer up your peers, you know, and interact with the speakers as well. I mean, because it's just the opportunity that you can share or express your idea to the speakers, on, you know, interact with the contents as well. So in that case, I upload all the recordings into the Google Classroom, and then if they don't, you know, ask any questions, you know, simultaneously during the presentation, so I ask them to leave comments and leave the question. And you know what? I collect all the questions and ask the student to answer the questions towards, you know, in corresponding to the recordings again, so that they can like remind themselves, and then to go back and see and watch the recordings again to see what's happened. But in this case, I'm just thinking about the criteria that when you use to measure the student, because the presentation is not just like the speaking skills, but we have to do some kind like the speaking skills, and then the pronunciation, blah, blah, blah. And another thing is about the presentation skills, like Mugee said. So that's this is a way that I have to divide the score into, you know, two big criteria benchmark to make sure the student. And that's a big concern, because when I teach, you know, students from the like first year student, second year student, they are quite small in the field, and that presentations is not, you know, maybe it's not good. But for the fourth year student, yes, we have to admit that, okay, there must be something, you know, bigger in terms of the contributions and how they practice themselves. And another thing about the presentation that I have to admit when I do ask them to do so is about the preparation. Like Sicien say that we have to give the topics before the presentation. So some of them, if they are good, and then they can prepare well and decide well, you know, what the sequence of the presentation going to be, blah, blah, blah. But for the, when coming to the real presentation in the classrooms or the virtual classroom, something like this, again, it depends. So that is, for the first time, it might be difficult, but for the next, you know, when they are familiar with this kind of method, so it's going better and better in this way. And that is the concerns about the presentation in my case. Mhm.
Thank you very much. I think Dr. Mugi mentioned this a little bit earlier when students would have to give them some time to check the videos that they're quite interested in discussing. And I think that's a good strategy. It's like synonymous to saying, would you like to check your notes? Right. So I think this is the best way to springboard to the next point, which is keeping them focused, the issues and the challenges in making sure that they are with us in this, online learning. So who would like to start this time? Perhaps we could throw it to anyone who would like to begin.
How about Dr. Müge?
Sure, go on. Dr. Muge.
I was just scratching my nose. Sorry, I wasn't raising hand, but it's okay. Thank you very much. I guess quite a few of us have already talked about some of the issues of staying focused. Making things in small chunks, I guess, is key because, as you've said, the Zoom fatigue, you just zone out. It's very difficult for our brains to take in all these small videos and images, moving images all the time. It's not natural for us as humans. It's mediated communication, it's not non-mediated. So I suppose keeping things shorter, like Sicien was saying, rather than having a 3-hour lecture, having it dividing it in different bits, having things in 1.5 hours, doing some asynchronous and synchronous activities, blending things that way, trying to organize the lesson structure as well in shorter periods, almost like teaching for young learners strategies that you have very short activities and swap them very frequently. Putting students in breakout rooms, giving them time to discuss and talk and contribute, and not expect contribution and participation in synchronous environments only on audio, but having them to contribute using some response software anonymously, using the chat box, getting them to produce and create and connect with each other. So designing tasks for interactivity as well. And the flipped approach, if that works, is better. So giving them the sense that they don't have to just interact and communicate in the synchronous session, but that they can continue the interactions, continue to respond to each other, like what Attapol was saying in their presentations, comment on each other's presentations and engage with it later on and communicate. I guess the whole of it is also making us stay focused in a short time period of, with short time spans. The movies now are faster. If you've watched movies 20 years ago, sometimes they feel so boring because the images don't move so quickly, because the audio doesn't, it's longer periods of talk, which I'm doing now. So I'd rather give the floor to somebody else. So to me, the key to stay focused is to keep variety and change and keep things varied.
Thank you very much. Why don't we listen to Dr. Hashishan?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. A variety of platforms is important. So with Zoom, I use a variety of online tools. I find that using online polls are very useful. So we use Poll Everywhere or Slido, or those free tools that you can use to create interactive polls. And that gives learners agency to perhaps raise questions, upvote questions, even raise topics that they want to discuss in detail. And again, that's another affordance of technology, because when we do a poll, and I remember I like using the word cloud function, it synthesizes and analyzes the data almost instantaneously, and you get a word cloud, right? And you get to see sentiments, you get to see the audience sentiments almost immediately. And that's something, again, that we can't do in a conventional classroom without this kind of tools. And with that, I think it creates, again, besides learner agency, it creates interactiveness. There's some kind of excitement here that my opinion in the poll actually matters. And now we're seeing it on this big screen, and I'm contributing to something. And now we can discuss about something else because I brought it up or something like that. So I think that's quite exciting. That's, again, another opportunity that online teaching and learning brought up for us. In terms of asynchronous learning platforms, I thought that was something very interesting, and possibly quite a lot of universities have started using it. They call it discussion boards or learning platforms, or maybe there are other words for it, some kind of a forum. And we have tried several in NUS. I remember trying Yellow Dig with my class. So it's yellow, the color yellow, and like digging sand. So I have never heard of it before that, but then I got to trial it as a tool last semester. And so we tried it with my students. So Yellow Dig is a bit like Facebook. The interface is very interactive, lots of emoticons, and they can post videos, news, anything. And it creates that online community after class. So it extends on the discussions we have in the seminar, and the students can discuss, they can share news, they can share videos, on this platform in an asynchronous way. There are several platforms like that. I think there's Montoya, there is Slack, I think, and I think they share a common aim of trying to create that online community outside the classroom for students to connect with each other. I think there are pros and cons of this. Maybe before I start sharing, if other speakers want to share before we continue with this, or oh, okay, I can continue. So just some very preliminary observations. The pros is, yes, we managed to create an online community outside the classroom because they start talking about topics that we discuss in class, and they went on to share more information and articles about it. So you kind of extend on the discussion, right? Now you don't have to squeeze everything into that 2 hours or 3 hours. They are learning on their own. They're looking for information on their own. They're sharing ideas and still continuing to communicate outside the class. So that's good. However, students also tell me that there's a big barrier of entry because there's so much text to read. So it's like an online forum. Imagine Facebook, right? But it's longer than Facebook. So everyone's writing long articles, and they find that they need to read what their friends have written before they respond, and then someone else respond or find something else to post, and that takes up a lot of time and effort. So to do this, they see it as additional work, especially if it's not part of the assessment. And even if it's part of the assessment, they find it a bit unclear as to how much do I need to post before I can achieve a certain grade or a certain score. Now, Yellow Dig incidentally ascribes a score, so they get a number of points every time they post something, and they need to post a minimum of 100 words or 150 words. And so you see why they create such long posts, and it creates a huge barrier of entry for some of them. So, well, you have some very motivated students who are really interested and they're sharing, but you also have a group of students who are kind of turned off and they're like, I'm just not going to engage with this. It's additional stress, additional work. I would just not do this. So pros and cons, I think. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hah. How about Dr. Monthon?
All right, guys. I do agree, like the role of flipped learning, right? I do a lot of flipped learning these days in my classes, where they say like go and explore a kind of video, reading materials, or whatever it takes to come to class and then discuss and then raise some issues about that to stay focused. And one thing is that I would love to add a bit of like the task instead of like designing normal learning tasks. We need to add some challenges for them to stay focused. For example, like the reading text might be a little bit difficult for them to read, so that they kind of like find a way to come up with a kind of like questions or discussion points in the classroom. So that is part of what I actually tried to create in my previous semester, where the students have to find like difficult tests, like TOEFL, IELTS tests, and they have to do it continuously, like, and they report their progress in the classroom after a period of time like that. So students reported some kind of like pro and con, as Sicien said, like they stay focused sometimes, but at the same time they feel like the challenge makes them like feel like motivated to learn, which is going to be more like of the second topic that we're going to talk about, right? So so I would feel like make the task challenge and at the same time like doable outside asynchronous before we come into the class. That will be a better way to get the student motivated. And in online discussion, actually, we actually need to use a kind of platform where the students can share the idea. As I said before, I use Jamboard, where the student come and then post everything and write everything under the same topic, and they don't have to show their own identity. So they have the kind of freedom to write, to voice anything on the discussion Jamboard identity like that. So, and the class seems to be okay and fun, and the student stay focused. So hopefully that might work in the future as well for us to keep practicing. So that's what I can say about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Monthon. Dr. Attapol.
Again, in my cases, I think one of the challenges that come in the playing the role as when we do the online learning is about the lack of the motivation. I mean the student motivation, and that will become the lack of the teacher motivations. When the student have a low motivation or demotivate is when it's like if they sometimes I think of myself when most of the students switch off the camera, and then I keep the talking just only the backboard in front of me, and then it seems like, oh wow, this is just a one-way communication or not. But you know what? The students are there. All the students are there. If I ask some questions or if I ask to do something, they're still there. And it seems to me like, okay, it depends on us to create the task. And I myself, I will not do just only the online class, but I have to use the offline class like asynchronous as well. Maybe, assign them to do something, because I notice a couple of my students, they don't have any iPads. And it's very hard for them to complete or to do the assignment. For most of the students have the iPad, they just copy and paste and then write on the board, and then they just save it and send it to me, submit their task to me, and they can grade it very easily. But for a couple of students, they have to ask their mom and dad to print it out at the office, at the parents' office, and then go back home and then to write it down, try to answer the questions, and again they captures and send the pictures or photos to my backboard or to the Google Classroom. So it's very hard for them, and I think it depends. And in my case, I just use not just only the online learning online platform, but I have to think twice. And one more thing is about the exams. Maybe I jump into the another issues, but about the exams, I have to forget about the all versions of my exams, and all the things have to be critical. And this is one thing that I have to teach all the students about the critical thinking, because all the exam items must be critical much more than before. I mean, because it's cannot just to search from the internet and then they can answer the questions easily. But I need to create something like the alternative takes, or like we talk about presentations, or do something like assignment, blah blah blah, so that they can. That is one of the challenges for them, or even the group work, and it depends on the how much or how hard working that they can afford and contribute to the group. That's something of the challenge that sometimes we cannot measure. This is in terms of the online learning, or even asynchronous learning, and I think another challenge is about the accessibility of the internet, accessibility to the internet, that all the students cannot do equally in even one class or one course, and that is the thing that I think it's a big challenge in terms of the online learning. Again, teachers need to be trained um, in terms of the online teaching practice and how we provide the activities. It's not just like a game, the applications or the way that we deliver the lessons online, but it depends on how much the student can engage on these all things online as well. That is some of the concerns that I can think of right now. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. I think to sum up this key discussion, I think it kind of allows us to reflect that online teaching is not really synonymous to face-to-face teaching. And the main takeaway is that we have to maximize the affordances of different online tools because this will allow us to open a multimodal learning, teaching, and interaction. Right. So in the next key point, I think I would want you to address all the key points to ensure that we're able to manage the time quite well. So the next part is we're going to talk about the motivations in online learning and teaching. And in this particular key point, we're going to look at the views. How do undergraduate students view online learning? How do we keep them engaged? This time we're looking at how are they able to keep motivated in really taking part in the learning process? And of course, how do we reach out to those less motivated students? So perhaps we could begin with Dr. Montoya.
Okay. Basically, like motivation is super low, right? When we are online, right? When the class keeps going on and on and on, like a lot of students like turned off, and even like teachers turns off as well. One thing I do a lot, I do a lot to help the students like engage on. Motivate in online learning is like they have to choose their own learning. Learning lessons or learning materials, right? For example, I get the students to think about how they actually like perform in tests, what kind of strategies in online tests they do, what kind of like thing, some kind of challenging thing that I talked about, and how to get the students to think about it and researching it, and then bring their own like findings to class, and then the student have kind of like high motivation in kind of going for and look for the things they can do. But of course, there will be some times that the students are turned off, right? Some students turned off, and what I actually do is like, I get them like, okay, you don't need to do like kind of the same topic that other friends are doing. What you want to do is what you want to do anyway. You may choose to offer like the K-pop video, watch them all, and then think about how they play it or something like that. So find some kind of like strategy learning on their own so that they can just keep motivated. And in the classroom, the teachers don't have to like present, keep talking in the class, going for the slide by slide, all the textual things. I believe in the role of multimodality, like how pictures, videos, all kind of things like that helps the student to motivate as well, right? Most, as I said before, like I always bring in like some kind of like video, which is kind of like posing some problems or challenges, and get the student to watch it and discuss in class. I mean, the student watch on their own, and then they come to class and get to talk about it. So this is kind of like, move around with what we do from our class to outside class in the flip version, and then the student can get motivated somehow, right? That's what I can say about in terms of motivation and demotivating students, right? That's it.
Thank you very much. How about let's listen from Dr. Hah.
So motivations, I think we've covered quite a lot about strategies to motivate students on online learning through a variety of platforms and tools. I think what I'm going to say might overlap a little bit with the idea of learner identities as well. The views that I hear from my undergrads when we were using Yellow Dick and talking about technology use in universities, the students felt that today's learners have a lot more agency. They observe within themselves that they feel more empowered, they have more agency to choose the ways in which they learn, the pace in which they want to learn at. So how fast or how quickly. They can choose when they want to watch those pre-recorded lectures, the webinars. So there's a lot of agency, and our students are aware of it. But at the same time, they find that there are more distractions now. It's very hard for them to focus on one activity or to master a skill or a knowledge, a piece of knowledge thoroughly before getting distracted by some other thing. They also feel very stretched by a lot of demands of various technological platforms. So at any one point in time, besides watching the webinar, they're maybe engaging with a friend on Telegram or a chat, and then they're on Facebook, and maybe they are trying to Google for some information to do research for a paper. So in a way, mentally, they are very stretched in that sense. And that's what some students reflected. They feel that things are moving a lot faster, so they don't have time to think or delve into a topic deeply. And I think that's something impactful about how technology use in teaching and universities can actually impact upon learner identities.
Thank you so much. Let's listen to from Dr. Mugee.
Thank you. If that's okay to share a few slides again, I think I'll take you to
Sure.
participation and participation patterns. I'm not an expert in motivation, but I'm aware that motivation is a concept that is complex, and there are various perspectives towards motivation. From my line of work, when I participate when I'm motivated, and I participate in conversations when I like those people, when I like to connect with those people. And that's what I wanted to say around social presence. So I'll just share a few slides on the community of inquiry framework if you're interested, if anybody is interested in this. Social presence is only one component of building a community. So as I said, the link to me is for motivation is I find students motivated when they're part of a community, when they want to be part of that community, and when they want to share. And what the community of inquiry framework tells us is that there is the cognitive presence, which is the meat of learning. That is the ability to construct and confirm meaning through sustained reflection and discourse in a critical community of inquiry. That's what we consider as learning. But social presence, on the other hand, is the ability of the participants to project themselves socially and emotionally as real people, not just on-screen images, not just people who are in the ether that don't have an entity, that don't have a body, through the medium of communication online. And Garrison, Anderson, and Archer say that social presence actually holds cognitive presence together. So it's not direct learning measure, but it facilitates learning at such a level that it is one component that is of equal level as teaching presence. And that's the third component in the framework, that if you just let learners be there, socially present, they may not talk about the learning gains. They may just go on and talk about anything they want to talk about, build a community of something, but may not be a community of learning and community of inquiry. So the teacher's presence is, again, as important to design, to facilitate, and direct cognitive and social presences. The way I see this is, I'm just trying to move to the next slide, but it just popped onto my LinkedIn. Okay, let me try to do that. Here, there you go. So the graph you see on the right-hand side of the screen is from 2016. It was a blended learning attempt. We had pre-COVID, none of this was available at the time, but blended learning ideas were still there. And we implemented the blended learning approach to a teacher training course with the fall semester and the spring semester. And you see students' patterns of participation in these two semesters. Obviously, when we started, there was huge interest in contributing to a discussion board on Canvas, a learning management system. And everyone posted, like what you were saying, Sicien, very long posts of 150 words. All 40 students contributed, and there was a lot to read, and they became tired. So there was another peak, and then it went down because students just couldn't manage what to read and what to contribute to. We only told them to read at most 3 people's comments and contribute 1. But the the dynamics were different. But as we moved on to the second semester, as they got to know each other, as they started to build a community of inquiry, we then saw a bit more of a kind of more static graph. Still, there is a peak at the beginning and a bit of a downtime, and then a peak at the end when the exams are closer. So there's more motivation to contribute and participate and to learn. That pattern of participation to me is quite relevant to the maybe a pattern of motivation the students feel to engage with the course, which may not be too different from fully face-to-face classes, that you start very motivated and there's a bit of tiredness and a lot of work and you feel disengaged, but then you pick up towards the end. You do realize how important it is. Something we looked at when we were looking at patterns of participation is Julie Salmon's book on activities. And in this book, she gives us 9 metaphors of learner participation, describing what their behaviors are online and how you as a teacher can motivate them to participate. So there is the wolf, elephant, squirrel, mouse, mole, rabbit, stag, magpie, and dolphin. So for example, the mouse visits the platform once a week, reads a little bit and contributes a little and then disappears. It's not that your course is not part of their life. So the moderator, so the teacher can check that they can access all messages, can check language difficulties. If they need a boost of confidence, the teacher can then support the confidence of the mouse. The stag, on the other hand, has a tendency to dominate discussions at certain times. Those are the highly active, highly motivated students who want to say something whenever you ask a question. So the teacher could then kind of invite the stag to step down a little bit and offer them structured and specific roles, maybe ask them to help others. The dolphin, as you might think, dolphins are quite playful animals, are intelligent, they are good communicators, they're playful. They may annoy some of the participants who think it's so serious, why are you joking, we're trying to learn here. But they are quite the cement that is keeping people together. They are the social butterflies in a way. So you can acknowledge the dolphin, that they work well with others and encourage them to participate. So the metaphors are interesting and they do match with the different learner motivations and identities as well. So what I try to do in my classes is to increase self-awareness of their patterns of participation, when they feel more motivated, when they feel less motivated. And I ask my students to create a poster expressing their differing patterns of participation. So this poster on the left was from the 2016 course that we tried, the blended learning model, where the student starts with lots of books, very tired, and then becomes the mouse, relax a little bit, and then going round becomes the stag, dominates the discussion, becomes the boss, and then becomes a dolphin, becomes more playful and enjoys the whole course. This poster was really interesting for me because it shows how fluid patterns of participations are. So students don't participate in the same way throughout the course. They change character, they change their motivations, and they change participation patterns. And this second poster was from last year or the year before, just before COVID, I guess. This time, this student kind of reflected on how their patterns of participation and motivation to participate is context dependent. So if it's a Facebook or an Instagram, they're a squirrel, they catch up with family and activities for a while and then disappear. But if it's WhatsApp, they're more of a dolphin. They semi-instantly rapidly connect with family and friends and using more frequently. Whereas if it's kind of Twitter or some of the other Bebo kind of platforms of blogging, they rapidly produce and share content, connect with friends, and then hibernate for a long time, because these platforms expect you to write longer posts for you to reflect, think, and then create and put something important out there. So depending on the platform, depending on the time of the course, to me, participation patterns and motivations are fluid and context dependent. And for us as teachers, I guess it's important to give this self-awareness and agency, as Sicien was saying, to the students themselves, to be aware of when they are less motivated and to be aware of what they can do to help them learn and take more things away from our modules and courses. And that's what I wanted to say on motivation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's listen now from Dr. Attapol.
So now I think they need to buy some sticker, or maybe to search for stickers of animals and then assign it to my students like now. From now on to my class. That's another idea to, to assign the roles, the different roles when doing some activities, right? Yeah, thank you, Mugee. For me, after listening to the Mugee and Sicien and Mugee, I think that the first and foremost thing of the online learning to motivate the students to learn is about we need to ask the student or encourage the student to have a self-directed learning, because if they cannot survive with that independent learning in the online classroom, so that's we can lose some of these students in the group. I mean in our online class. And then I would say that self-directed learning and collaborative learning or collaborative project work, I have to admit that I always assign, like the independent work and then the group work, even collaborative project work in the online classroom, so that I can access them and then monitor that progress. And I think these both of these and these two skills and these two things are the prerequisites for the online learning. I mean the self-directed learning and collaborative learning. And that is a way, and that is a priority, the first thing that comes to my mind when I created all the activities. Because when for the first time that I create the activities, I always assign the roles, like Mugee say, present to us like the first one should be like this, and the second one you are assigned to do this. But after that, I mean the second activity on the next activities, you may switch the roles, and then we can see how they grow in terms of a collaborative project work. And it depends. I think all the activities are tentative. I mean, I always inform my student that the things that I put in my course syllabus or the course outlines maybe a change. It's a subject to change, because it's like we will not know, we cannot expect what will happen in the online class, and then it's something like we can change all the time. And this is the way that I always do it in the online class and the when I teach my students, and it depends on the topics. But one thing that I always think is like all the activities that I try to create must bridge something that will happen in the classroom, even face-to-face classroom or the virtual classroom, and it's something that they can do outside the classrooms as well. I mean, like to sit and chat with their peers, or to converse or exchange their ideas, or to search from the internet if you can accept this. And then maybe you have to notice your student that yes, it's okay, it's acceptable, but you need to adapt a bit, and you need to, again, it's come to our task that we need to ask them to do something like a processing, and then blah, blah, blah. It depends on us, it depends on the activities. And that is a way that we can raise that motivation to learn. And one of the things that that come up into my mind right now is about, when we talk about the motivation. So most of us may think about the autonomy, and then that come to my question, all the times about the autonomous learning here. If we just think about that theoretically, autonomy is independent learning and self-directed learning. But in the online classroom, we always like act as a facilitator, teacher, commentator, blah, blah, blah. And we ask the student to learn, we ask the student to engage. And that's just the way that we do like the autonomous learning or not, or just a bit on, just a stepping stone about the autonomous learning. That is a question. But yes, and we still to do something like this in the online classroom. But Monthon, you want to say something? No?
All right. Thank you very much. I think this session kind of reminds me what I think Dr. Muge and Dr. Sishan mentioned in the previous session about the time and space in online learning. And it's quite critical in, helping students to get motivated, particularly in making them understand how they, you participate and perform in different online platforms. So basically the main takeaway in this session is really giving students that agency to choose and explore their own interests and really take part and take that active engagement in their own learning process. And that particular time and space is also important to allow them to navigate their own learning at the given time and at a given space. So what we have not so much time, but we will let's discuss the next topic, which is very much linked to what we have been covering, which is the identities in online learning and teaching. So in this particular section, we're going to look into how do we facilitate discussion and assessment, particularly as a teacher, as a lecturer, how do we impose our identity or how do we manage our identity? And perhaps the impacts of technology on learners' identities and how do teachers and of course students manage their identities online. So perhaps we can hear Dr. Sishan.
Okay. So I think we have kind of covered how students have been impacted upon by technology use and how their identities are changing as learners. So I mentioned that they now feel they have more agency. In fact, they feel they have access across space and time to new educational opportunities like MOOCs, massive online open courseware like Coursera, edX, HarvardX, there's this big explosion of this kind of free courses online. So actually students now feel like there's even more knowledge and information out there that they can optimize, that they can learn and make use of. So therein lies the autonomy and the agency. But at the same time, like I said, there's a lot more distractions. There's also this feeling of too many demands on their time and they feel very stretched. And this has caused anxiety issues, some mental anxiety issues for them. There's also this feeling like, oh no, how much must I learn? How much must I do, in order to be as good as my classmate or my coursemate? Am I doing enough? And so I think to manage this, perhaps there requires a certain kind of meta awareness because after all, online learning is relatively new. And now that we're doing it almost 100% from maybe 30% or 50% in the past, we're basically just plunged into it like 100% because of the pandemic. Perhaps there's a group of students who lack that self-governance or that time management or that kind of awareness of how to manage themselves, their interests and their motivation and their time in order to choose what they need more immediately. How do they manage their time to do it? What are the skills they need? How do I process this information and knowledge properly? It's some kind of perhaps a meta awareness or a different kind of awareness of how to learn perhaps that they need now in order to grapple with the new demands of technology and online learning. So perhaps that's something to think about in the future.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sishan. Let's have Dr. Attapol.
Dr.
Yes, good.
Right?
And Dr. Attapol, would you like to?
Um, sorry. I can hear what you. I think when we ask most of the students about the technology and the online learning, I think most of them we can have like positive ideas or positive attitudes from the students, and yeah, we admit that because of one of my research conducted with the Thammasat and my colleagues say that from 8 students from 8 universities across Thailand express their positive attitudes about the online learning and the using the technology as a supplement when doing the language classroom. But one thing that we have to think about is, after the or the post-pandemic or after the this kind of situation is about, how we can stimulate the students to learn more about the online learning, because right now I can see that when comparing to the previous time, the previous semester, I can see that most of the students are very fatigued when they do the online learning. Even us, because we don't like to speak, just like in front of the blackboard. But and sometimes I have to admit that it's very difficult to create new thing all the time. And some of the teachers say that for the undergrad students or the postgrad student, using games is cannot do all the time in the classroom, in the online classrooms as well. So it depends on how we keep balance between the content that we have to deliver and how we can achieve the course objectives within the time frame and in the online setting. And that's come to our decision when we have to do something like both the formal setting, I mean in the virtual classroom, like face-to-face like this, and informal classroom if we open the space for them to share. And that's just the thing that we have to think about this. And another thing is about the how we create the meaningful resources, or how we can use like available resources from the internet. If we ask a student to search something and then contribute to and use it in our course, and that's the thing, because we have to teach our students not just only the thing from the content from the lessons, but we have to teach them several things. And what about the assessment and the exams as well? It's very hard to control. And if we try to create something like complex one or complicated one, critical one, maybe we can, it seems to me like we cannot measure that performance directly. And it's kind of impede our teachings, or the way that like our teaching practice as well. So we need to learn a lot. And I need to say that our students are very competent at the technological skills compared to us, I would say. So this is a time that I can see the opportunity that we can learn and improve our technological skills as well, and how to keep up with the advance of the technology. Yes, not from now on, but I think from today, from the past, and in the futures as well. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Let's have Dr. Monthon.
Okay, so basically a lot of people have covered quite a lot about identities of the learners, right? But I would say a little bit about teachers then. I'm actually working on a research project on teachers' identities and feelings and motivations in using technology. And most of the time I found right now that the current pilot study is that the more experienced teachers feel more comfortable in challenging themselves using the IT skills. So I think this kind of finding is very interesting because if we haven't found such a kind of thing like that, we wouldn't be able to meet all of you today, right? Basically, the thing about technology is that the teachers are only afraid of making mistakes. I think that's the first factor that I found in online language teaching from the teacher's perspective. They're not afraid of like using any kind of platform for their language classes or learning new skills in IT, but they are just afraid of like technical problems that might happen in classroom. So transferring this kind of findings to students learning, hopefully like we should try to challenge ourselves a little bit of learning new kinds of platforms, technology, or programs for the students to engage with. Then, so it's not the students themselves that have problem, but the teachers actually have the problem as well. So that's why we need to step in and help teachers to develop their own skills in language teaching as well. That's the point I found I wanted to add on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Monthon. Let's have Dr. Mugee.
Thank you all for your really insightful comments around identities and technologies. I suppose we're now moving into the normalization stage using Stephen Bax's concept where, distance and online learning and teaching is not so new. We've got at least 40, 50 years of distance education and 20 years of online communication, starting from emails in 1990s, end of 1990s. But it is now becoming normalized. We have to make it normalized in a way. If the pandemic wasn't there, we're very happy communicating with people face to face. We still want that. Online communication is different. Yes, it has opportunities and it does come with certain limitations. Affordances and challenges always go hand in hand. So I think it's really important to think that maybe perhaps, as teachers, you might be thinking we're not as skilled. We don't have the same digital literacy skills as our students. But what we observe in our research is students don't always have the same digital literacy skills to use those skills for learning and teaching. Yes, they're great communicators on social media. They create perfect Instagram posts, but not always for the means to learn and teach. So I think as teachers ourselves, we need to be a bit more confident as well that we can be open, we can be vulnerable, we can learn from our students and we can teach each other. We can teach them how to use those technologies more effectively. In a quite recent publication in Recall, the journal Recall, Murray, Gerald, and Banini, they talk about critical digital literacies in the sense of how learners manage their distractions. So they're thinking of, they are aware, they're competent, but they're not really skillful at using those technologies to the point, to the purpose. So we need to make them create awareness and agency for them to use those technologies productively and skillfully. If I have a few more minutes, I think what I wanted to say around identities was a perspective on self-representation, because identity is again a huge concept that's really complex and fluid. But I look at it through multimodal self-representation. And this example I'm going to show you is from a virtual exchange project, an online intercultural collaboration between my students in the UK who are applied linguistics in TESOL, in my MA students, and an English language teacher education undergraduate program in Turkey. So this is the fourth iteration of the exchange. I think we had started before the pandemic and we continue throughout the pandemic and have seen how the pandemic had an impact on their motivations to participate online, because everything is online now that they weren't so much interested this year to then interact with further people online. But this comes from a pre-pandemic exchange. And we start all the time, as Mugee and Attapol were saying, it is important to get people to break the ice, to get them to know each other. So we always start with a Padlet board where all participants can post images, pictures, and very short, briefly introduce themselves to each other. So the example I'm going to show you is from one of the students in the UK who is Italian, who is now connecting to students in Turkey. And the images I'm going to show you are her Padlet post images, where she's also posted a video as well. So this was a very successful post for us for self-representation, because it was a group of about 40 students, and this post received the highest number of likes, 13 likes, and 7 comments. And the students have told us that the comments are key. On social media, they don't really care about the likes, but when somebody comments, kind of comments are so they kind of valued the comments a lot, and this student received the highest number of comments. So what she did was, when in her self-representation, a lot of the students posted pictures of themselves kind of looking really pretty with their animals in their kind of either bedrooms or outside, very similar to social media profile pictures that they would have. But this student posted them an image of herself when she actually traveled to Turkey, to Istanbul, to one of the busiest tourist streets. She's holding a very traditional bagel, which is called simit in Turkish. She's smiling. And even in the background, you could see the Turkish flags. And she said, even in her text, she's saying, here's a picture of me in Istiklal, Istanbul, blissfully eating a Turkish bagel simit. And I find it exciting and everything is really nice. So she's presenting herself as a person who's very happy to communicate with her peers on the other end of the other end of Europe, I would say here. So she also posted this video in Newcastle. Some of you would know, we've got a market, a traditional market called Granger Market, which has stalls, food stalls and some corner shops. And I'm just going to play, hopefully you will hear the sound of it as well, her little clip of what she posted.
Market now. It's one of my favorite places in Newcastle. It's a quite big market, it's in the city center, and I like it because they sell fresh fruits and vegetables and they're quite cheap. I know it doesn't look so exciting from this video probably, but I really like it because I think it's an authentic place. And oh, a Turkish street food restaurant. I've never been there. Oh, now I'm going to have some good pizza. Here they make very good pizza. Bye.
So what I don't know whether you were able to hear what she was saying. So what I like about this video for self-representation is she's Italian, she's in Newcastle, and she's walking through a historic market in Newcastle in the UK, and she's walking past very authentically. The video clip is like, you see, it's not professionally taken. It's what she does on a daily basis. And she's going to get pizza. And on the way, she notices a Turkish corner shop, which she hasn't noticed before, but she doesn't edit it out. She doesn't make it perfect. She just posts it and shares herself as a real person, not as a perfect, carefully planned image of herself, but something she creates and posts right away, very authentic. And she does say that she's self-aware. She says, it was a great advantage for me to have a positive Turkish experience to share, showing a picture of myself in Istanbul, mentioning the Turkish word. And it was a way to prove that I was not saying that Turkey is beautiful just to sound nice, but I have really been there and experienced something real. And again, with the market, she's saying that I wanted to show something authentic about the place I live. I have chosen video as a channel of communication as I think it makes people feel more involved and allows them to grasp a more realistic and direct knowledge of reality. So it's just an example of how some students are so skillful at being able to present themselves as real people and authentic, and other students on the other end who had never met her. This is only a Padlet post, the first time she's communicated with them, and they were automatically able to relate to her, engage with her, and they've exchanged some comments. It was just 1 week as well. We didn't give them a lot of time to engage with the Padlet posts, and there were 40, 45 other posts that other people could engage with. However, not all students are as skilled at the same level. Some students did feel, oh, I posted my favorite picture of this beautiful sea, but no one sent me any comments. So some are really skillful at presenting themselves as real people, but others are not. And as teachers, we're the same. Some of us feel more confident, some of us don't. I guess as technologies become more normalized, we'll get used to represent ourselves better using the different modalities and contribute to things and just support each other and be open and be, vulnerable and open about the challenges we face and the troubles we face, but also support each other. Perhaps that's the key for our future online interactions.
Thank you very much to all our speakers. This has been a very wonderful session. It basically allows us as teachers to really, shift our perspective on how online learning should be conducted. And I think the notion where transferring face-to-face instruction to online may not be the way. Rather, looking at it in the very rich affordances that online learning is offering. And I think in terms of how multimodality allows students or even teachers to explore language learning and teaching is really to understand how different, let's say, semiotic modes or like emoticons represent our identity. And I think it was mentioned earlier by Dr. Hashishan and Dr. Mugee when we talked about the first session, the anonymity. It kind of allows them to really, express their deepest thoughts without the fear of being called out or being corrected. So I think that allows that multiple identities at play, and it informs identity is not really stagnant. It's really changing. So this has been a very wonderful session. Before I go to the final thoughts, I would like to open the floor first for questions. I received one question earlier, and let me read that. She says, "Thank you all speakers very much for sharing tips, techniques, and important issues teachers should take into consideration when designing a lesson. However, apart from Padlet and Jamboard, could you please suggest any of technological tools that may help writing activities, that is, writing a paragraph or an essay, more interactive and interesting for undergraduate students?" Anyone who would like to provide answer?
Mhm. So Ajahn Monthon,
Actually, I
any
stick to like
Jamboard?
the available, available resources we've got at hand. So most of the time I use like Google Doc for the students to to come together anonymously to like to help to share write on the Google Doc, right? And for the interaction, besides like writing, some kind of activity, Jamboard would be better. But most of the time, actually, if you have no access to such new technology or something like that, using a plain like blank where the students can actually come in and enjoy, like even in Zoom, whiteboard, that's fine enough though. You don't need high technology to get the students to come in, right? That's the point.
So allow me to respond to this point because I know some tools. There'll be Padlet. There'll be besides Padlet, there'll be Menti, menti.com. There'll be a lot of like online tools which is free available online, and nowadays every tool I think there will be like what we call single sign-on, which means that you can use like your Google account, your Gmail account to sign on to like to sign into every site. Yeah. So Joey, can we like
Thank you very
if anyone would like to ask, can we turn
right.
on?
So right. I think this is the best time we can accommodate maybe 2 or 3 questions. So let's make this more casual as possible. So if you feel free, like sharing your thoughts or posing a question, feel free to unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
So if you like, if you do not want to turn on your microphone, you can type on the chat and we will like, read your question.
Right. So maybe while we're waiting for some questions, let me take this opportunity now to ask our speakers final thoughts on the future of learning, online learning, and perhaps its, let's say, long-lasting impact on learners and teachers. Would you like to start, Dr. Monthon?
Basically, for the future of our teaching, we're kind of avoid like getting into technology. So basically, what I would suggest for all the teachers to start doing is kind of like using flip learning, where you don't need to get everyone into your controlled room and things like, getting everything to do. Start doing some clips, learning some new technologies to start creating your own like learning project, and then in the end you will survive anyway, right? That's what I can say about learning. Opportunity is everywhere. Learning new skills is your takeaway to do, and get the students to experience that with you, and you experience that with them as well. That's the point.
Thank you very much. Let's have Dr. Sicien.
the future of learning and teaching online. I hope that in the future we might be able to overcome some problems that teachers face when we teach online. So I want to echo what Attapol was saying just now about when students look demotivated and disengaged, teachers feel it as well. And it reminds me of how teaching is very much a performance, and teachers are to some extent performers. I remember listening to a podcast, Simon Sinek interviewing a British comedian, Michael McIntyre, very famous stand-up comedian. And because of the pandemic, he was forced to move some of his stand-up comedic performances online. And he craved this audience affirmation and laughter, the spontaneous kind of interaction that you can have with your audience only when you're doing it live. Doing it online was completely weird for him. And I think for teachers, it was the same. It's very hard for us to make sense of whether our students are following, whether they understand or agree or disagree what we're teaching without that kind of spontaneous interaction. And so I think this is something that hopefully with a bit more time and, I don't know, technology, we might be able to find some way to overcome. I think that will help quite a bit.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sicien. Let's have Dr. Attapol.
So for me, I think it is come to our decisions about the way that we think about the measurements or the assessment of the student performance in each class, in this course, because each course we have the different course objectives. So if we have just only, look at the way that the approach we use in the online classroom, and then we focus on that. So maybe we have to think that, how much the students can learn from us, and it's very hard to, access that. And another thing is about the way that we monitor the student progress during the course as well. I mean, because the online learning, they can research, like Monthon say that, yes, they can learn everywhere, every time, like, on the street, at home, or even in the library. But so if they can improve, the student can improve their ability to learn, and what is the way or what the approach that we can motivate the students' progress, and that has come to my mind. I mean, during the course and after the course. So what we can support them, how much we have to step for them, and what is the activity that we have to think or make a decision for the next session, for the next lesson. So that is, it's like we have to develop and improve our teaching skills all the time when we have to monitor the students' progress. And that is very difficult for us. I mean, in this online learning. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. And let's have Dr. Mugee.
I think I'd like to end with a metaphor, kind of working around Sicien's concept of performance. Yes, teachers are performers on stage. And if you think of the stage as a theater, when you go and watch a play, to me, that's more of the physical classroom. And when you watch a movie, that's more like the online classroom, where there is, it's more edited. Things are a bit more action and played out, and you don't have that feeling of being together. They're different experiences. They can both be interactive. I don't know whether you've been in a play where there is interactivity, where the actors ask you questions and direct the sequence of the play accordingly. And even in movies, I think it was the Black Mirror TV series. They had an episode, Bandersnatch, which actually was transformed from a computer game, where if you watch it on Netflix, you choose which decision the actor is going to make, and then the ending of the series is determined based on your choices. So both environments can be interactive in the classroom or online, in both metaphors. I think what we will see in the future is more of the hybrid context, where maybe the audience is online while the actors are playing, Maybe some of the audience is sitting in the theater with you, some are connecting on the screens. Maybe some of the teachers and actors are online on the stage and some are online. And I hope that will give more equality, diversity, and inclusion to our teaching, where some of the students who might be sick that morning may still be able to follow up. Students who live far away, students who have disabilities, where distance education actually has the best affordances and benefits, are those kind of groups who are working during the day, who don't have access. And perhaps in the future, now that technologies are becoming more normalized, more teachers teaching in the physical classroom will be open to those people who cannot come to their classrooms and reach out. And us can reach out to each other like today. So it was really, really nice for me to hear your opinions from Thailand and from around the world today, and being able to connect with you even when I'm not in the UK, even when I'm on leave. If the technologies were normalized, you wouldn't be open, people wouldn't be open. We had at one time 135 participants. So thank you for the audience as well for being here today with us and being open to listening to a discussion when it's only on the screen. So I guess that's how I'd like to end my perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that that's what most scholars are saying now, that technology is not going anywhere. And I think this disruptive era the post-disruptive era wouldn't tell us that we go back to that normal, as in face-to-face. Rather, it will really circumvent different policies and even the designs of language learning and teaching. And I think I would like to highlight what I think it was Dr. Mugee who mentioned earlier, how, language changes, whether it is taught in a native language or not. We're now looking at the languaging, where language is a social practice. And it is complemented by different semiotic modes that allows us, let's say in theater, we have more props, we have more tools to design and make things a lot different. And with that, I think this will be the best way to end the conversation by a question which Dr. Atapon raised earlier about assessment. So let me read that question real quick. Do you think when we switch to online teaching, we tend to assign students too much work because it is hard to assess them? What would be your responses and suggestions?
Okay.
Go on, Dr. Montoya.
Okay. All right. Just it's me, right? So don't assign too much work then, right? So if you decided to assign too much work, so delete it, reduce it. So that's going to be the way to do. We do face this kind of problem where we have to shift to a lot of tests into tasks, and then it's not the same anyway. If you change the test to the task, it's not the same. So why don't we actually have big tasks, one project, and that's it? Instead of keep testing all the times. So, reduce the tasks. That's the point. That's what I can say. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Agree.
How about, go on, Azan.
No, continue, Joey.
All right. So let's have, who would like to answer that? I think we have two questions currently. You may see the chat to really look them up. How about Dr. Atapon? Would you like to respond about the assessment question?
Hmm. About right
Do you mean the writing one or the
one, I think.
The assessment one.
assigning student too much work? You mean which one?
In
Right,
the
right.
right.
That one.
Okay. So I think not because it's hard to assess them. I mean, actually, when you make a decision to assign a task, you have to think that the way that you assess them, or the way you can mark, all the assignment, all the tasks first. Yes, basically, because we have to admit that we cannot on the student or take the student like in the traditional format. And then we have to separate all the tasks, like several tasks, so that we can keep up with what the student can do in the class And that is a way that I do as well, because actually I we can just separate the scores of the scores or point in the course, and then we can use it and report it as the progress that student can do, the student can have, blah blah blah. So I think this is not the too much work, but we can separate, like, okay, this is a this is a like final project, and this is the group work, and this is it depends on how you decide it. Not separated into too much work, but the way that you create it, the way that you assign it, it depends on the course objectives or the things that you need to assess the student, but don't separate it too much work. Just to separate it to see or monitor that learning progress. That would be okay. And for the writing one, I think we have one question about the writing, that the student sometimes use the paraphrase too, right? How do you deal with this kind of problem? Accept it. Because it's just the online learning, right? And then we know that in the field that we have the paraphrase too. And if you want to check it, that the student use a keyboard to paraphrase or translate. So why don't you go back and ask the student to paraphrase again, like to report and maybe to change. This is a writing class, right? So maybe you can do something like writing online writing, not just assign the student to do it at home, blah blah blah, but you can do it like face to face or via Zoom, or to do it on the Google
Doc?
No, it depends on it depends on the platform that they can use to ask them to write simultaneously in the class, and that is a way that you can you can do, but just accept it, and then because it is an online class. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think Dr. Sicien mentioned that earlier about assessment. Instead of taking them as separate, assignments or homeworks, put them as a big project. So each of the tasks that they will have to do works in building that project. That way, the assessment for students would not be that tedious. They find it fun, doing that project. And I think it's also the same way with teachers. Assessing a well planned, and you can see the different progress into which this project came into light. So I think with that I think it's good to close our discussion. But before that, let me just plug what's gonna happen next for the TEFL session. So after this, there's going to be another session which is happening on the 7th of August, and this is on why reading is good for L2 students and teachers. So if you feel like joining us in this session, feel free to scan that QR code to register, or you can also visit the website of TEFL. I believe it's also available, or just follow Adan Pontingon. You'll see all of these informations on her Facebook page. So thanks everyone for joining us, and our speakers for giving us such a wonderful insight. And I think the digitalizing here talks about us humans and how we participate in this online platform.
So on my last words, so I feel thankful for all the experts to come and share your, let's say, insightful experience of online teaching. And I think it'll be useful for friends in the field of ELT. I call friends because we know each other. And let's say that let's say our dear colleague from abroad as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jack
Thank
Thai,
you.
would you like to take a group photo? Yeah. Ajahn Pasara is here as well. Hi, good afternoon, Ajahn Pasara.
Thank you, Kun Monthon, Kun Attapol, and also my the two of our guest speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So can you stop pinning pinning us and then do the group photo like
Present. I'm removing now the spotlight.
and thank the audience as well for joining us today.